Mary as obedient, as the servant of God, is silent. Well, nothing could be less silent or docile than my generation of women, who, when they arrived in college in the mid-60s, changed everything, changed the whole cultural landscape, not only of America, but of the world. And it was not feminism that did this. Feminism burst forth again after being dormant for so many decades, since women won the right to vote in the early 1920s. It was not feminism that did this. Rather, the feminist movement sprang forth at the end of the 60s as an outgrowth of our rebellion. Most of the women that I knew in college from 1964 to 68, bawdy, feisty, aggressive women who could deal with men, who loved pornography and so on, most of those women did not become feminists. Most of those women are out in the general culture. And I, however, have been committed to feminism for my entire life, before even feminism was reborn, before Betty Friedan wrote her book, before Gloria Steinem decided to join the movement, and so on. What I represent in the feminist tradition is symbolized by the cover of my new book, where I am posing with knife in scabbard. I'm in my Diana Rigg Avengers mode. As a guerrilla fighter, I'm wearing a Marine Corps jacket I bought in the Army-Navy store. As a symbol also, and this fits in with the red, white, and blue colors of the cover, as a symbol of, it seems to me, the need to go back and recover the values that the 60s destroyed, and one of these values was patriotism. The Vietnamese War was a terrible mistake, but here it is 30 years later, and the left is still sulking. We cannot have a situation where every expression of patriotic belief is automatically defined as conservative, or again, in some way benighted or parochial, or something that only rubes and hillbillies will do, and so on. We cannot have this, all right? I belong to a family whose uncles were sent to Europe to rescue the world from Hitler. We Italian Americans had to make a choice, which is why I think we're very patriotic. Italy was allied with Hitler. And everyone in my family, of my father's generation, had to make a choice between their native land and their new land. And they chose America. And many of them were injured, or fortunately, there were no deaths in my family, but there were injuries. My father was poised to drop into Japan, into the emperor's pavilion, and it was only the dropping of the bomb that stopped that. Probably his entire corps of paratroopers would have been slaughtered. They were assigned to take the emperor's dwelling and so on. And therefore, I have been very, very unhappy with the kind of sneering at patriotic belief that goes on routinely in the elite schools on the part of so-called progressive humanities faculty. And I think it has to stop. It is pernicious. Again, it is driving people to the right. It is natural for people to be patriotic. One thing that struck me when I arrived in Philadelphia 10 years ago was how proudly African American working class men and women wear the uniform. It struck me, right, how often I would see people wearing uniforms from all the different branches of the service, and the way people greeted them and so on. And I realized how different that was from the behavior of those lazy, good-for-nothing professors on the elite schools who never did anything in their lives. They're not the ones who are sending their children to war. I'm being beckoned to. Are we about to move into the question period? This is true. I tend to take audiences prisoner. We go on for hours. All right, we're going to have questions? All right, this will lighten the evening for you. All right. All right.
Okay, first question. You mentioned repeatedly, and to great effect, what you despise of current popular politics, culture, etc. What do you see? What do you love of what you see?
In politics, I think it seems to me indisputable that the MTV generation of young people is progressive. It is more tolerant of bisexual experimentation. It is extremely positive toward African American culture. I have great hopes for the future. I just want to improve the education that our young people are getting. So I think that young people in general are tolerant in their viewpoints, even when they identify themselves as conservative. I think that there's a kind of enlightened conservatism on the part of many young people that is not like the sort of Neanderthal conservatism that that is so stereotypical.
This is something that's appropriate to our city. What advice do you have for Hillary Clinton?
Fasten your seatbelts. This is a long story. I loved Hillary Clinton in the campaign. I was on the Donahue show with Susan Faludi the day that Hillary Clinton made that answer. In fact, Donahue surprised us by showing us the footage and asking us to comment on it, of her saying, well, listen, I could have stayed home and baked cookies. I loved that. I loved that tone in her, that kind of bitchy tone. And I thought she had a wonderful manner in the campaign. And anyone who may doubt this, if you just that film, The War Room, where you see little snippets of the way she was, it brings it all back for me very nostalgically. But it seems to me that from the moment of the inauguration, some change seemed to come over her. And one saw it even in her manner. It seemed like all of the charisma, it seemed to vanish from her. And she had a very kind of negative, sour look that gave me a kind of chill, even before he gave her the health care assignment, 1/8 of the national budget to deal with. I was very struck, and I think it's in the new book, how Inauguration Gala Night, how buoyant Clinton was. He has the common touch. He was like enjoying himself and clapping, and tears were in his eyes, and embracing everybody and so on. And he has the ability to enjoy himself. And she was sitting there the entire evening like this, totally buttoned up and tight, and again, a chill went through me, and I thought, oh no, oh no. It's almost like she'd lost her balance, lost her center. Now, my advice to the Clintons, I wasn't asked, but my advice would have been, considering the controversy over Hillary Clinton throughout the campaign, people calling her the Lady Macbeth of Little Rock and so on and so forth, considering how much animosity had built up, what an unknown quantity both she and he were, it seems to me it would have been wise to allow the country to get to know Hillary Clinton for a few months, to just be a normal first lady for a few months. Would it have killed them, to let her be a normal first lady? Allow the people to make visits to hospitals, be seen working in the flower bed, take Chelsea to the zoo, all kinds of things. Then once she was put in charge of something controversial, she would have a power base. People would, she would be a familiar figure, and you wouldn't have what happened, which seemed to me utterly stupid and disastrous. Suddenly, several days after he took office, guess what? You thought she was just going to be a normal first lady. No, I'm giving her this. That was ridiculous. She had done nothing, very little in her career to deserve to be put in charge of this enormous program. Then the way she went about it, this huge, committee, the secrecy, the sense that it seemed like a despotic element in her was coming out. The Madame Nu or Evita Peron, part of her was coming out. And what I most regretted was the loss of that charismatic balance that she had during the campaign. That is, she began, she was frowning. Naturally, if you have so many, she reverted to her eager law student mode, right? Naturally, she wanted to do well, and so she was frowning. And you would see her, she would get off, the helicopter on the White House lawn. Those people have no sense at all of how to use TV, right? She would get off, and her collar would be up, her glasses, she'd look like a Russian spy. Her glasses like you'd see her in profile, hating the press, going right from the helicopter. Now, you all know, remember Reagan would go, like wave, what? Like that, One wants to feel that the people in the White House are balanced and centered, and leading lives where they can go to bed at a good time. One wants to feel that the important decisions are being made by well-rested, well-rounded people. So, they dug themselves into a hole straight off, and also those first weeks, the disaster of the gays in the military thing, which let me just segue into that, because that was part of the ridiculous decisions being made there, the gays in the military thing, and the whole Clinton presidency came apart in the first week. The far right was demoralized. The far right had been defeated, all right? And the errors that were made in that first week allowed Rush Limbaugh, whom I do not demonize, whom I respect as an independent voice in this country, even though his political views are quite different than mine. Rush Limbaugh's power gained enormously, all right, as the Clintons offered themselves as perfect objects of satire. That's the point, okay? They became great jokes for comedians, all right, and so on. But the gays in the military thing, let me just talk about that, because. Now, my position as a libertarian is that no institution has the right to control what you do in your free time. That it seems to me that an institution can require that while you are serving in uniform or on an army base or whatever it might be, that you refrain from certain kinds of behaviors that are forbidden or whatever. But no one can stop you. If you want to leave there and go down and put on drag and go to a bar and have sex in alleyways, it's no one's business. This is my position. All right? However, I can understand why this is a very difficult problem, given the closeness of living quarters for soldiers. It's a very, very difficult decision. Once Clinton had indicated in the campaign that he intended, as best he could, to remove all barriers to gays serving in the military. Then it was his obligation, considering the burden he was carrying as someone who had never served in the armed forces and had this reputation as a draft dodger. It seemed to me incumbent upon him, first of all, to get the respect of the armed forces immediately. That was the first thing he had to do. That was the first job he should have done. The first weeks and months of that presidency, Bill Clinton should have been going out there and visiting bases before he ever raised the gay issue. He should have been out there visiting bases, getting to know the serving men, becoming popular with the armed forces, trying to understand the way they work. Right? Instead, he just threw this card on the table. It was so idiotic. So what he should have said was, all right, I'm going to appoint a committee to investigate this question. The nation knows that what my sympathies are here. I would like to know, however, all the problems that might result from such an executive order that I may make. I want that committee to report to me within 6 months. I will take it under advisement, and so on. All right, then all the problems should have been worked out in advance. Every logistic problem through gays, of gays now serving openly in the military should have been addressed and dealt with in a report. All right, with the committee reporting to him potential ways to solve those problems, all right? And the committee could have advised the president not to open the military to gays, all right? But it is up to the president to make the decision. Then I see him getting that report, then taking under advisement, and then writing a magnificent speech where he addresses the nation and makes a thoughtful speech all about civil liberties and civil rights and democratic principles and democratic ideals, and then says at the conclusion, and although I'm fully aware of the problems this will cause, and I have tried to investigate these fully, I am trying to be fair to everyone, it is my judgment that gays must be able to serve openly in the military. That is what he should have done, all right? But he's surrounded by idiots, okay? Clinton is a 60s progressive thinker, like everyone in my generation, but he surrounded himself with 80s yuppies. George Stephanopoulos, Mr. Yuppie Man, all right? I see him on the streets of Georgetown. I will pluck that man bald.
What do you think of Kurt Cobain and the music of Nirvana?
Well, on the one hand, I'm happy that the Generation X now has an authentic rock martyr, as we did. We had Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison. I have to grieve in a way, because it's the suicide that Kurt Cobain committed is, while it's a throwback really to early romanticism, the death of Chatterton and so on, it is so unlike the mainstream of avant-garde deaths, like Jackson Pollock being drunk and having women in the car and wrecking, and wrecking the automobile and all that. Jackson Pollock died actively, and and Jimi Hendrix had a hot night with a woman, and et cetera, and had come out from a party, and so on. It was sort of an accidental death. It's one of the great burdens, I think, on Generation X, the enormous creativity of 60s rock musicians. I can understand the restiveness of young musicians, this sort of staggering under the omnipresence on radio airplay of the boomer music and so on. And I think that's perhaps part of Kurt Cobain's melancholy, in a way. The difficulty of what my mentor Harold Bloom would call belatedness, of coming after the fact. It's unfortunate. I don't, again, as an Italian, I believe in directing my hostility and aggression outward. And I hope that my followers will punch and kick other people and not harm themselves.
How can you say there is no cleavage between art and pop art, but differentiate between good classic canonical text and modern relevant text?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm saying is that I want to preserve ideas of quality and value, but I want to merge these two traditions. Okay, so I can say, for example, I have made the statement that the best novel written after World War II is Anti-Mame. And I mean that literally. I am not someone who reads the contemporary novel. I feel that that nonfiction has absorbed many of the fictive prerogatives and styles of the traditional novel that was at its high point in the 19th century. So I certainly am not someone who is simply traditional about the canon. I believe that the canon is always evolving, that one is constantly making decisions for each year, for each new generation of students, and so on. But I've for my entire life, have never made any automatic distinction of value between the classical tradition and the popular culture around me. And it was once it was highly controversial. I can recall I looked at advertisements that I saw in magazines or on television as equivalent to the paintings that I saw in museums or the Egyptian hieroglyphics that I saw when I visited the Metropolitan Museum as a tiny child. And I always loved advertisements, always. In fact, one of the first big projects I did was in, I think it was like 6th grade or something. I did a whole, what today would be called a semiotic analysis, and so on, of advertisements. For me, advertisements always had higher meaning. It could be because, like Andy Warhol, I was raised in a Catholic tradition with a lot of iconography around me, and so it was just very natural for me to move from the iconography of Mediterranean Catholicism to that of advertisement and so on. I think that even today, most people would not regard advertisements as an art form, but I do. Again, I'm someone who I believe in the great works of the past. I believe in, and I similarly believe in the canon of rock and roll. In fact, I've pointed out in a piece that I wrote for the Modern Review in England, that's in my new book, that when Lenny Kravitz does his Jimi Hendrix imitation, you are getting canon formation. That's canon formation, all right? That to invoke Hendrix's memory in that way. And unfortunately, for current musicians, no one has gone beyond Hendrix. People are trying vainly, to surpass him. Now and then, someone can produce the tone. Now and then, someone can turn the guitar upside down and get some other thing that he was able to do. But the totality of Jimi Hendrix's revolutionary sound, no one has been able to imitate. So we still are staggering in contemporary rock under this, the burden of the canon in rock. And this is true of every culture. See, this is, I despise the provincialism of debate about these issues in America, because every single great civilization of the world has its own canon. I mean, Japan has, if you go to an African tribe, you would find that there were certain artworks and styles that were esteemed and considered canonical. And then as you go down, you have people breaking the canon and remaking it and so on and so forth. Anyway, let's go on to the next.
All right. You